The air was thick, heavy with silence, broken only by the slow dripping of water from the prison ceiling. Deep within the bowels of an Egyptian dungeon, a place where sunlight rarely reached, there sat a young man. His wrists bore the marks of iron chains. His clothes were torn, his body weak, but his eyes still carried something different. Hope. This young man was Joseph, the favored son of Jacob, the dreamer who once wore a robe of many colors. Now, a prisoner in a foreign land. How did a boy chosen by God end up here, forgotten, chained, and alone? Let's go back to where it all began. It started with a dream, 2 dreams, in fact. Dreams that spoke of greatness, of divine destiny. In the first, Joseph saw himself and his brothers binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly, his brothers' sheaves bowed down to his sheaves. In the second, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down before him. He didn't understand it fully, but he knew it was from God. He spoke of it innocently, perhaps with youthful excitement. But his brothers were filled with envy. That dream, meant to reveal his calling, became the spark of his suffering. One day, while Joseph was sent by Jacob, his father, to check on his brothers in the fields of Dothan, they saw him coming, the dreamer, walking with confidence and a heart full of love. But hatred had already taken root. "Here comes the dreamer," they whispered. "Let's kill him, and see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, tried to intervene. "No, don't shed his blood. Throw him into this pit instead." They agreed. And as Joseph approached, smiling, unaware of their plans, his world collapsed in an instant. His robe of many colors, ripped from his body. His voice, crying for mercy. His brothers, unmoved. They threw him into a pit and sat down to eat, while he screamed for help. But help never came. Until, a caravan appeared, traders heading toward Egypt. And for 20 pieces of silver, they sold their brother, their own flesh and blood, into slavery. That day, Joseph lost everything, his family, his freedom, his home. But what he didn't lose, was his faith. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, a captain of Pharaoh's guard, a man of power and influence. And though Joseph entered that house as a slave, something about him was different. Potiphar noticed him. Whatever Joseph touched, prospered. The presence of God was upon him. So Potiphar placed everything he owned in Joseph's hands, his household, his fields, his wealth. For a moment, it seemed God was lifting him up again. But little did Joseph know, a greater test was coming. Potiphar's wife, drawn by Joseph's beauty and strength, began to desire him. "Lie with me," she said. But Joseph, loyal to his master and faithful to his God, refused. "How can I do this great wickedness," he said, "and sin against God?" Yet she persisted, day after day. Until one day, when no one else was in the house, she grabbed his garment as he fled. In anger and humiliation, she screamed. She lied. She told her husband that Joseph had tried to violate her. And in that single moment, without trial, without mercy, Joseph was thrown into the royal prison. Imagine that moment. The same hands that managed an Egyptian estate now bound in chains. The same voice that spoke truth now silenced in a cell. The same man who once dreamed of greatness is now hidden beneath the ground. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Months into years. It must have felt like God had forgotten him. But God never forgets. Even there, in the darkness, Scripture says, the Lord was with Joseph. He gave him favor in the sight of the prison keeper, who soon placed every other prisoner under his care. Even in chains, Joseph was still trusted. Still anointed. Still chosen. Sometimes, God hides your destiny in dark places, not to destroy you, but to prepare you. One morning, 2 new prisoners were brought into the cell, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and his baker. They looked troubled. Their faces were filled with confusion. Joseph, noticing their distress, asked, "Why do you look so sad?" They answered, "We have had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them." Joseph's response was calm but confident. "Interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer spoke first. "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches, and it budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I pressed the grapes into it." Joseph listened, prayed silently, and said, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." The baker, encouraged, shared his dream too. "I also saw 3 baskets on my head. In the top basket were baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds came and ate them." Joseph's heart sank. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head, and the birds will eat your flesh." Both dreams came true, exactly as Joseph said. Before the cupbearer was released, Joseph pleaded softly, "Remember me when it is well with you. Speak to Pharaoh for me. Get me out of this prison." The cupbearer nodded. But when freedom came, he forgot. Days passed. Weeks faded. Months dissolved into years. And still, silence. There he sat. Still faithful. Still waiting. Still trusting in a promise that seemed too far to reach. But in the courts of heaven, God was not silent. The story was far from over. Because the same God who allowed Joseph to be thrown into a pit was preparing a palace. And soon, Pharaoh himself would dream. A dream that only one man could interpret. A man hidden, in a prison cell. The chains were about to break. But not yet. Because before the light of destiny shines, God first allows the night to deepen. Years have passed. The walls of the prison have become Joseph's silent companions. The faces of those who once promised to remember him, long forgotten. His youth, slowly fading into manhood. Yet through every season of silence, Joseph's faith never died. He did not know it then. But heaven was setting the stage. Because in the palace of Pharaoh, miles away from that prison, a storm was brewing, a storm that only Joseph could calm. Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, awoke in terror one night. He had dreamed of 7 fat cows grazing near the Nile, suddenly devoured by 7 thin, sickly cows. Then another dream, 7 healthy heads of grain swallowed by 7 withered ones. He called his magicians, his wise men, his priests. But none could interpret it. Fear filled the palace. What could this mean? And then, the cupbearer remembered Joseph who interpreted his dream in the prison. He rushed to Pharaoh. There was a man in prison, a Hebrew, who interpreted dreams. Everything he said came true. Pharaoh ordered, "Bring him to me. At once." Joseph, unaware of what awaited him, was suddenly called out of his cell. Guards led him away. They shaved him, gave him clean clothes, and brought him before the throne of Pharaoh. Joseph, once a slave and prisoner, now stands before the king of Egypt. Pharaoh's voice thundered, "I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. I have heard that you can understand a dream to interpret it." Joseph lifted his head, his voice calm, unwavering. "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." That statement, simple, humble, would change his life forever. Pharaoh recounted his dreams, his eyes searching Joseph's face for meaning. As he spoke, Joseph closed his eyes for a moment, listening, not to Pharaoh, but to God. Then, with divine certainty, he said, "The dreams are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years of plenty. The 7 thin cows and the 7 withered heads are 7 years of famine. There will come 7 years of great abundance throughout Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Let Pharaoh appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the land, gather food during the years of plenty, and store it for the years of famine. Said Joseph. The room fell silent. The magicians stared. Pharaoh's officials whispered. Then Pharaoh stood and declared, "Can we find such a man as this, in whom is the Spirit of God?" He turned to Joseph. "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as wise as you. You shall be over my house. Only in the throne will I be greater than you." Just like that, in a single day, Joseph went from forgotten prisoner to second in command of Egypt. He was given Pharaoh's signet ring, royal robes, a gold chain around his neck, a chariot to ride beside Pharaoh himself. The people bowed as he passed. And in that moment, all of Joseph's pain, betrayal, and waiting finally made sense. Every pit, every chain, every tear. It had all been part of God's timing. Under Joseph's leadership, Egypt flourished. The land produced in abundance. Granaries were filled until they overflowed. For 7 years, Joseph worked tirelessly, storing grain, building cities, preparing for the famine that would soon come. And then, it came. The Nile dried up. The fields turned to dust. Crops failed. But Egypt, because of Joseph, had food. And from distant lands, people came to buy grain. Among them, his brothers. Yes, the very men who had sold him years ago. They came, bowed before him, and did not recognize the brother they had betrayed. Joseph recognized them instantly. His heart trembled, not with revenge, but with emotion. He remembered the dream. The dream that started it all. And now, it was happening. His brothers bowed before him, just as God had shown. But Joseph didn't reveal himself. There was still a test. A test not of vengeance, but of forgiveness. For Joseph, the pain of the past collided with the purpose of the present. He could have destroyed them. He could have repaid evil for evil. But instead, he chose something greater. Grace. Because Joseph had learned something in the prison of waiting. God's timing is perfect. He understood now that every delay was divine design. Every closed door had been God's redirection. Every injustice was preparation for influence. And before the reunion, before the tears and forgiveness, Joseph wept alone, overwhelmed by the beauty of God's plan. Joseph's story teaches us something we often forget. When God delays, He's not denying, He's developing. When Joseph was betrayed, enslaved, and forgotten, he didn't see the full picture. But God did. Every moment of pain was a brushstroke in a masterpiece of redemption. If Joseph had escaped the prison early, he might never have stood before Pharaoh. If he had never been sold, Egypt would have perished in famine. God's plan was not just about Joseph, it was about nations. Lessons from Joseph's story. 1. God's delays are not God's denials. What feels like silence is often preparation. 2. Your pit is not permanent. The same God who was with Joseph in the prison was preparing him for the palace. 3. Faith is trusting God's timing even when nothing makes sense. When everything falls apart, remember, His plans are higher, and His purpose is good. Maybe you're in a prison right now, a place of waiting, of pain, of unanswered prayers. You feel forgotten. But the story of Joseph whispers this truth: you are not forgotten. God's timing may not be fast, but it's always perfect. He's writing your story behind the scenes, aligning the right people, and preparing the right doors. Don't give up in the dark, your palace moment is coming. If this story moved your heart, remember, it's not just ancient history. It's a living message of hope, reminding you that God is still working, even when you can't see it. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that God's timing is perfect. Leave a comment below and tell us, what prison season are you trusting God through right now? Subscribe to Mercy Bible Stories for more Bible stories that will renew your faith and deepen your walk with God. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we reveal the heart of God through them.